This is the podcast Person of Interest, where we meet extraordinary people with a story to tell.
Welcome back once again to our podcast at the Stockholm School of Economics in the centre of Riga, and I'm delighted to welcome another guest. Today's guest is Chanpreet Arora from India. Welcome, Chanpreet.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Now, Chanpreet is a media consultant, currently consulting with the New York Times. She has a very impressive CV, on which you can read online. She launched the Vice media brand, youth media brand in India. We'll be talking to her about that. And she recently completed a fellowship at the Reuters Institute at the University of Oxford in England. We're going to be talking about India, your homeland, and particularly the media scene and youth media scene. But I wondered if, first of all, you could just give us a little bit of an introduction to your background and how you happen to be here today.
Thank you for having me here. I started my career in financial technology. I realized very quickly it was the most boring place to be in. It smelt of money. It was all about money, but media shapes cultures. And it shapes how we think as a generation, and that's what got me into media. I started my career with Ernst Young as a consultant, and we worked a lot with media technology companies and media companies and helped them come into India. And then I got Formula One. It was as bright and snazzy as it gets, and I
as a contract
to help them set up shop in India.
Right, for the Grand Prix.
For the Grand Prix.
Wow.
And it started with simply a contract. It's my favorite story. It started with a contract saying, we've decided to bring Formula One into India. So I'm like, is the question if or is the question how? And they said, how? I said, okay. So we answered the question, and I focused on Formula One for 4 years. And then I never went back to consulting. Just running media companies is the most fascinating experience because it's almost like physics versus economics. In economics, you only take into account fictional factors like money, right? But in physics, you take nature and you take a lot of fiction that we create together, and that makes it unpredictable. And that's what a media business is. It's people, it's culture, and it's a lot of technology.
Well, mentioning that Formula One, that's so interesting. I might just take a moment to
sure.
follow up on that. I mean, what sort of strategy did you use? Was it the case that, I mean, if I recall correctly, there were quite a few different places that were sort of bidding or competing to host a Grand Prix.
Yes.
So I'm assuming it was not a foregone conclusion at all that India would get one of these. So was it a case, and I've done a little bit of work in the automotive media industry myself, and I know that there are some huge and not always very pleasant egos involved.
Yes.
So how did you kind of negotiate that? Because you have huge egos, huge budgets, and really high stakes as well. I mean, there are issues of national pride and so on involved.
Okay. So first of all, let me tell you, it was all about the money, right? Whoever was the biggest bidder, they got it. In my humble opinion, I don't think all the strategic factors were taken into account while bidding for it either. And the company that bid for it finally did go bankrupt. So that kind of says it. It's nothing confidential about it. So they were the highest bidders, and that's why they got it. Why did Bernie Ecclestone choose to be in India? I think that was the smartest thing to do. We are 425 million people today under the age of 25 alone. The average age of our country today is 27 and a half and is going to remain 27 and a half for the next 3 years. So to invest in a market where you had interest, you had a very rich population, but you had no fan following, what better than to put up a circuit there? And you already had one team in Formula One from India. So it made a lot of sense. There were a lot of execution errors that were made at a strategic level itself, which was that the government wasn't involved in Formula One. And I think that is a big learning for not just Formula One, but everybody in the world, that when such millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars are being put into a new sport, the government needs to come in. And wherever you see in Formula One across on the globe, wherever a government has been involved, a new country has been able to sustain Formula One. So that was our learning.
Well, you've mentioned what I think is maybe the killer fact that I came across during the research, that, everyone knows India has a huge population, more than 1 billion. But as you say, there's 500 million, half the population is 25 or under, which seems absolutely staggering, but kind of leads on to my next question and our next area of discussion, which is that you took the Vice brand into India. I mean, it kind of answers why you did that, because there are so many young people there.
Yes.
But how was it different to, say, the US version of
Very
Vice?
different, yes. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk a little bit about youth in general, and let's not focus on India first, because there is a lot of learning for us in what youth is. Beyond the age, there is nothing demographically that you can actually use to define cohorts within the under 25 Gen Z, as we call it. They're actually united by their interests. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Because they are the first digital native population that we have seen worldwide. And one of the biggest revolutions that we are seeing is the mobile revolution. In India, television density has never exceeded 66%, but our tele density is 91%. It has, for the first time, gone beyond urban and rural divide. It has gone beyond language divide, and it is giving an opportunity of personalized entertainment for the very first time. Television viewing was a family viewing method. So was the newspaper. And there were a lot of limitations of media because of that. But now, a mobile screen, we have 1.7 billion. For a population of 1.2 billion, we have 1.7 billion mobile connections in India. Right? Everybody has a screen. And they choose what matters to them. This is giving rise to a very different consumption pattern worldwide. There are 2-3 things before we zoom into India. One, you are no longer launching a media brand for a geography. You're launching a media brand for a cultural connect or a community connect. This community could be across borders. It doesn't necessarily have to be in New Delhi. So when we launched Hindustan Times, not we, but somebody launched Hindustan Times a century ago, it was for New Delhi circle. Now you launch news and somebody sitting in New York would be reading it. So that's one. Second is social. The social media revolution is what Gen Z was born into. Millennials who are probably 35, 36, for them smartphone was the biggest revolution. There is a huge difference in the way we consume media for that very simple reason. Why is that? Today, when I use a smartphone, I go to a news app, a designated app, to get news. Whereas Gen Z logs on to their network, whether it's a Snapchat, whether it's an Instagram, Facebook, or their messaging platform, doesn't matter, and gets news from various, in their feed, from various friends, people, or media brands who are talking to them. That fundamentally changes the way how they think. And their worldview is influenced by this platform, not by my friends in the physical space, not by my parents alone. Fundamentally different. And in India, this has actually given rise to one of the most important, and I think that two very significant things that have happened in India is one, the language revolution. It has suddenly become viable for me to have language media because I'm no longer stuck in this high distribution cost, high marketing, production cost, and then producing content only for those languages where advertiser interest stands. Now I can create a content for $2,000 and put it out on social media, maybe add another $1,000 for promoting it, and actually get audiences. Right? And as I build audiences, I can then start doing live shows, if I'm a stand-up comic, or I can get advertisers to start using me to promote their voice through my content, it's given rise to multilingual content. It's given rise to more conversation. And one of the most important innovations that happened because of the digital revolution was, and I think the credit goes to Google, their NBU program, the Next Billion User program. I don't know if you're aware of it. They have been investing significantly in technology and some of which is changing the way the world uses the internet. Voice search came from there. Language keyboards came from there. Digital payments has come from there, right? Because this is the unbanked, the illiterate, and non-English speaking. And that's the power of what's happening. This is not, when we say youth which goes to an English medium school, can afford education abroad. This is a completely new person who's probably living in a village, doesn't speak English, doesn't aspire to speak English also maybe, but is now an avid consumer of content and also using the very same mobile screen for a lot of other things that improve his life.
Well, the implications of this are absolutely mind-boggling, surely. I mean, I kind of really don't know where to start unpicking that, but probably the most obvious thing to say would be, I mean, you've outlined that we have economic forces here, we have information flow, we have cross-cultural currents, people sharing experiences and content that maybe they would have been separate in the past or addressed separately. So where do you think it's leading? Because it almost sounds like there's this huge sort of laboratory going on a grand scale, and it seems that perhaps what's happening in India as a whole is going to have implications for the whole world as well.
It is already happening.
But I mean, what sort of society are we going to see in the future, given that these Generation Z people have been exposed to this way of thinking, this way of, as you say, gathering their information, which I think for old fogies like myself is very hard for us to understand. And you've just sort of opened the window on it a little bit now, and I'm kind of thinking, I don't know where to start processing this.
So I'll tell you, there's a 3-step process, and it's taken me a lot of time to come up with this 3-step process, right? It's really simple. Number 1, do not label them. Do not generalize. Just because I'm 24, please do not expect I will behave in a certain way. Mm-hmm. That is one of the biggest departures in mindset. And don't underestimate the power of this. They're born in an age of personalization. You know, you and I get really excited when we get a mail. Dear Chanpreet, here are your 4 options for Thailand. And you're like, wow, they got my name, right? But Gen Z expects it.
Right.
They're like, obviously you're going to talk to me about Thailand because I searched Thailand, you have my cookie, I'm not surprised. I expect that you will tell me what are the 4 different places to go in Thailand and what's the budget for it, right? So, number 1 is do not generalize. Even when we're looking at it as media, please understand that they are a certain person. So when you're building your content strategy or you're building your technology, you're building your media company, be very sharp about the persona that you're going after. Because
there is a bit of a tendency sometimes to, if you're targeting a certain sector of society or whatever, or an assumption perhaps that technology is going to sort of homogenize everyone and everyone will think the same way. But you're saying it was the opposite of that, is that everyone is sort of building a modular self.
That is the revolution. There is no longer space for homogeneous content models. Right? I'll just give you an example in gaming. It opened my eyes. Vice has changed the way I think. It has broken down all my barriers, and I cannot be more grateful for that. Let me share with you a fun fact. A PUBG gamer is a PUBG gamer. He doesn't care about other gamers. He has nothing to do with them. He doesn't enjoy talking to them.
PUBG, by the way, I do know, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Well done. So it's not just that you are an e-gamer. Which game? Right. That is your community. Do you understand? Like it's the personalization or community conversation is that specific. So number 1 is do not generalize. Understand that they are united by interests and they're not ageists. And I say they, but I think like them, so it's me. We are not ageists. why is it that shoes from 20 years ago have become popular? I like it, I'll do it. I can access it. And everything is culture over product. The biggest differentiator between Gen Z and millennials, because of access of information, is that culture has become really important. Everything they do stands for who they are. Their creative expression is more important. Let's take a global example of this. Graffiti. What was graffiti when we were growing up? Defacing of public art, as in public spaces. It was a criminal offense. Banksy, Daku, I mean, from India it's Daku, from this part of the world it's Banksy. They are changing the face of the common spaces that we inhabit. It's actually the most expensive suburbs in India today promote public art. They invite the public artists to come and do graffiti. That's a cultural shift. This is happening in Germany, in UK, in US, everywhere. So it's culture over product goals, no generalization, personalization. You can actually build your entire business on communities irrespective of age. And then there are cultural moments that you're choosing. The most important is to understand that their language is different from ours, right? You and I may be talking about a certain cultural moment in a very different language from theirs. It is really important when we communicate with them, we understand what are the pop culture references that matter to them. So, and a very good way of doing that would be by understanding their digital personas. Just the way how we dress in the physical world matters a lot to the millennials, but their public personas, their app personas, digital personas are equally important.
That's a very good point, because I've never managed to understand why people would pay money for, online skins or clothes for avatars and so on. But from what you're saying makes it clear that actually that's an important thing, and that how you look online is as important as how you look, in real life, perhaps.
Yeah, so O2O, I don't know if you've heard this term, online to offline, right? It's an O2O seamless transition. For the older generation, there is a distinction between reality and virtual reality. There is none for Gen Z.
Wow.
There isn't. That's the way it is.
And your third point then, because we had the do not label.
So
people.
what, where and how. So, or it's who, where and what. So who are they? Be very specific about the persona that you're going after. Who is the person? What are their interests? Then where do I find them? What are their app personas? Let me give an example. You use WhatsApp. I'm just not generalizing, but I'm saying if you're 40, you're using WhatsApp. You're 25, you're using DM in social media. You're not using WhatsApp. WhatsApp is what you use to communicate with your parents. It's true. It's how it is. And family groups. Hello, sweetheart, how are you? Good morning. Just that. So who are they? Where do I find them? What are their interests? And how do I communicate with them? For that, it's important to understand their cultural references. I was giving this example to you earlier. India is still obsessed with movies and Bollywood. And 15-year-olds are obsessed with K-pop. They're listening to BT. There is over 1 million people in India right now between the age of 15 to 20 who are obsessed with Korean pop. Now, if I'm launching a show for a 15-year-old and I put out a Bollywood star and pay him a lot of money, the show is going to bomb. But if the Korean star, sends them a feed from their handle that I'm really excited about this new Amazon Prime Video show, that's it.
Wow.
They're going after it. That is the difference of what we think we know and what's actually happening. I think the most important learning that I've had in working in a youth media space for so long is that when I want to talk to a 20-year-old, I not only have to put myself in their shoes, I have to have a 20-year-old in my team. It really is that. 24 and a 20-year-old behave differently. 24 was Instagram. 20-year-old is not Instagram. I mean, I don't know what it is. Just give you another fun example. Everyone said Snapchat's degrowing, Snapchat's never going to make it, Snapchat's dead, Instagram is in. Today, Snapchat Premium, after the launch of Snapchat Premium is growing 20% month on month in tier 2 cities in India. Why? It's become the preferred porn destination. Who's to say what to expect? I mean, and I don't know if it's confidential. It was a research that I read somewhere. I'm not authorized.
I think we had recently, there was some quite similar research in Latvia, actually.
Yeah, what was the result there?
It was something like 8 out of the top 10. It was a big split for men and women. So with women, there was a lot of, I think 8 out of 10 were shopping sites. And with the men, 8 out of 10 were porn sites.
No points for guessing that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not. But it's one of these facts which never really gets sort of brought out into the open, if you pardon the pun.
Yeah.
But you've been mentioning about endorsements by K-pop and made it very clear that there's huge economic potential there. There are economic imperatives, and that media companies are involved. But what is the sort of the economic model on which this operates, and is it independent? How independent is this media of, say, corporate control, governmental control? How does it all add up?
In terms of what's the business model?
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of advertising used on, Indian websites and so on. Although I should also note that, I run a Latvian news site, and I noticed that any time we mention India, the visit of an Indian politician or something, I get disproportionately large numbers of not only views but actually responses from people in India. They really seem to be online and kind of interacting, as you say, feeling that that's a natural thing to do, even with an obscure Latvian, news site.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There are 2-3 issues that the Indian media industry is struggling with. We don't have a subscription ecosystem. Let me tell you how staggering the numbers are. We have 570 million mobile internet users. About 200 million users access video online through Amazon Prime, Netflixes, Hotstars. We have our own OTT platforms, local OTT platforms. Guess how many pay for that video? Streaming platforms, 5%.
Right.
We have about 120 million users using online music streaming platforms like Spotify. We have Spotify as well, and we have Saavn and Gaana and many more. Guess how many pay for that?
About the same? I don't know.
1%.
So this is all pirated content then, or
no? Companies are giving it away for free for gaining market share.
Right.
Or the telcos, because the telcos are at war right now, telcos are giving it away for free. In the Indian market, you get Amazon Prime Video for free for 1 year with a telco bundle. You get Netflix for free for 3 months and you get Spotify has a freemium model. So we don't have a subscription ecosystem. That's the challenge.
And I guess once people are used to expecting it for free, it always seems to be said that then it's very difficult to persuade them later on to pay for it.
Yeah, just look at it from this point of view. Somebody or the other is in a market share war and they're getting everything for free. At least in TV, we had sports and entertainment that was never free. But the OTT wars and telco wars have made even that free. Mm-hmm. Which is really disappointing from a media industry point of view, because what that's forced to do, while on one hand we're talking about democratization, heterogeneous content, the platform business, if you look at content creator and then the platform, the content creators are no longer capable of investing the billions of dollars going into platform, which has put them one step away from the consumer. And so now it's a B2B business. It's no longer a direct consumer business. And while they get paid for their content, the platforms are giving it away for free.
And with news media, has there been any impact on, I don't know, I'm almost scared to say, news quality, if everyone is chasing hits for advertising purposes. I mean, is there some sort of news media where people go to not because it's exciting, but because it's the sort of thing of record, or where they're going to get impartiality? And would they pay for that? Yeah.
There are examples that are coming up. So there are two examples where subscriptions happening. One is business news. The Bloomberg Quints of the world. Bloomberg has a JV with Quint, local partner. So Bloomberg Quint, CNBC, TV18. Business news has been paid, always will continue to be paid. When it comes to the rest of general news, we don't have models like New York Times or The Guardian, which are so popular. It's free. It's an oversaturated, overcompetitive market. It's free. But now there's a lot of investment, not a lot, but a little bit of investment that's going into independent media, which is more like The Guardian sponsorship model. And a lot of small online digital companies are coming up, but they are philanthropic initiatives, and they're asking for money, and we are a long way off from seeing what that will be. We have a small digital media company which has really taken the initiative, but they also do a lot of business news, and they're sticking to being subscription driven. But we don't really have a model yet.
But could you maybe just give us a couple of names of sites or other resources that we could go and visit to find out a little bit more about what's happening in India? Because probably going in from outside and Googling it or something is not the best way to find these things.
So there was, if you're interested in news specifically, Reuters Institute for Study of Journalism released the Digital News, India Digital News Report. It was a separate edition. They released it in 2018, end of 2018. I think that's a pretty good resource to look up. Otherwise, in the media industry, doesn't write about itself, right? There's IAMAI, which is the Internet Association for Media. They are very active in mapping what's happening in the industry. And then there is Ernst Young's media report, annual media report, which gets published. It's free, it's online. It gets published every year in March, April. It's called, this year's report was called EY, A Billion Dreams, because it was a billion digital screens. So that's a very good report as well to look up.
Well, we're almost out of time, unfortunately, even though you've given us so much stuff we could delve into deeper here. But maybe to finish with, could you just give some sort of prediction of not what the Indian media scene or is going to look like in 5 or 10 years, but maybe how it's going to fit into the whole global ecosystem as far as information is concerned? Because it seems when you have that weight, the second most populous country in the world, and everyone, as you say, has got this mobile and everyone is using it, and it seems pretty unrestricted, certainly compared to, say, China, there's got to be a real, counterweight to what's happening elsewhere, surely. What's India going to do for the world?
I think there are 2-3 things that India will do in a big way. How the internet becomes relevant to illiterate audiences. That's more and more of innovations from there will be coming. And it's not just illiterate. I don't want to be politically incorrect, but people who are non-English. So the internet will stop being an English-dominated market, a platform, but will actually become truly democratized from a cultural and language point of view. Secondly, how we deal with banking technology and how we bring in the unused and the unbanked into the fold of internet. I think that a lot of that is coming from Asia and specifically India.
Well, Chanpreet, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here in
Latvia.
It's
a beautiful country. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was produced by SSC Riga. If you'd like to learn more about the topic, visit the open course schedule at SSC Riga Executive Education. For more podcasts, find us on Spotify, iTunes, or the platform of your choice. Remember, share this episode with your friends and colleagues.